Welcome one and all, it's time for another red hot, spicy, tingling Warhammer Age of Sigmar tournament report featuring the Stormcast Eternals. And let me tell you, it was quite an adventure getting this army ready, staying up until 3 AM several nights in a row, painting Liberators. What kind of a fool would undertake such a task so close to an event? Well, there is my force. This is the biggest TSN event ever, I'm led to believe, because the battle report room was opened up for gaming. I don't think it's quite ready for live streaming and filming yet, but there is the gaming table in there, so that means one extra table, so 26 players. And how do I tackle such a mammoth event as that? 26 players, wow! With more Stormcast Eternals, and some that I already have older models for. So I've got 10 of the very old Liberators, but they didn't come with a Grand Hammer back in the day, because these are just the original starter box Liberators we're talking about here. So the new ones, you obviously get the big fancy hammer. So 3 units of those I painted up, and another 3 Shield Annihilators to go with the 3 that I've already had for a few years since the Dominion box came out. Let's see what we've got going on in the chat. We've got Tobler Man, and we've got Optimus in there. Right, let's go through my list. We have got the Star Drake, one of the oldest models in the army. This is one of the earlier large models that I ever painted, actually. So, the Star Drake is the general, has the Quicksilver Draft and Envoy of the Heavens. So, once per game, strike first, and if one of my units died in the previous turn, and the turn right now is my turn, he can give himself or another nearby unit a 5+ ward save that lasts until my next hero phase. So he's mostly going to be using that on himself, probably when Liberators get themselves killed. That's the main idea with that. Then we have got, in that regiment, the Questors. 6 Questor Soulsworn, just 1 unit of them this time. I've been running 2 recently, but just 1, so I can squeeze everything else in. I'll tell you about the thoughts behind the list in a moment. We have then got a unit of... I don't think there's a close-up of these guys, but there they are. The Vigilors, represented by the old Judicators, obviously. Playing the part of Vigilors now. So there's one of the regiments. The second regiment is the Knight Judicator, perched right there. Not a very clear photo of him there. It seems to be focused on the brand new Liberators instead. And in that regiment, we have 6 Shieldy Annihilators. And then we've got 2 units of 5 Liberators in there. So you can see the various Liberators that have been freshly painted with very stylish faces and hairstyles. Then in Regiment 3, the 2 regiments of Liberators in that one. The next regiment we have got... Where is he hiding? The Knight Relictor, being played by this Questor Soulsworn, who is clearly just a Knight Relictor. So since I'm not using the second unit of them in this game, the Knight Relictor is played by what actually appears to be a Knight Relictor rather than the Lord that's been masquerading as a Knight in some of my recent games. And in that regiment there is 1 unit of 5 Liberators. And then in the final regiment is just the Knight Arcanum. So a bit of spellcasting with the Morbid Conjuration for some Purple Sun action. And what is the plan? Well, there wasn't so much of a plan... Oh yeah, there's long strikes there as well. 3 long strikes perched at the back. There wasn't so much of a plan with the list building as there was I must fit in all these models that I've painted. Because to get myself ploughing through the backlog of miniatures that I had yet to finish, I decided I was going to paint up the 3 Shield Annihilators and 15 Liberators in a very short time. So several long nights in a row eventually got them all done, so I've replaced my old Liberators, or I could just run 25 in a list at some point if I want to use the old ones as well. And so they had to come in immediately, so I had to run the Shield Annihilators and the Liberators, so that was the basis of the list. I was then adding on top of that, thinking how can I make something that is actually going to accomplish things in a game. So The heroes have gone for Knight Judicator, because he's just good at shooting things and gives me another regiment. More regiments I have, the more chance I have of getting the reroll, a priority later in the game, which you generally want to give you more chance of maybe getting a sneaky double or denying the enemy double. Then the Knight Relictor for some teleporting shenanigans, useful for scoring tactics and jumping onto objectives. Spellcaster, so I can get some manifestations and to deny the enemy their manifestations and spells in general. Just nice to have a bit of a spellcasty in there. Stardrake, because I felt the whole army was lacking a little bit of hard-hitting punch, and its ability to just eat entire models, I thought was definitely worth trying out. And instead of going for what I have been doing with the Stardrake, which is either give it no ward save at all, or run the Praetors with it, I decided we'll leave them out, save the points, and instead go with Envoy of the Heavens instead, to try and get the ward save that way. And we'll see how that goes, because it's obviously significantly cheaper. You just have to have lost a unit in the previous turn each time, and I've got 11 units in the army, so it's possible that some of these 90-point Liberator units could get themselves killed and set off a ward save that then lasts for some time, especially if they're double turns for the enemy and such. It can actually last for quite a while, that ward save. Toblerman says, why did you drop Hour of Glory for the Stardrake? So that's why I thought I'd rather have a ward save and Quicksilver as the upgrade, so I could have a bit of strike first in the army, and then a little bit of strike last on the shield annihilators. When they get charged, they can potentially make the enemy strike last. So a bit of strike first, a bit of strike last. And I've actually got a lot of units in this army that benefit from Finest Hour, so I don't necessarily need to be spending it all on one thing. Annihilators can use it very well because they wound on 3s. Questors wound on 3s as well, so they can make good use of it. And the Lord Celestin on the Stardrake, his hammer, also wounds on 3s. So various units that might want to have the Finest Hour, and obviously all the Liberators wound on 3s as well, so maybe they can have a go at some point. The Long Strikes are in there for a bit of shooting damage, along with the Knight Judicator and the Vigilors. So those three are mostly going to be deployed in the heavens and then drop down to unleash a ranged barrage into a specific part of the enemy force. And then the Questors and the Annihilators are pretty solid blocks. The Questors can of course get their ward save if they're on their favourite objective, and the Annihilators have a 2-up save and potential strike last when you charge them. So those two are going to look to lock down maybe objectives. Stardrake go around gobbling up anything that looks particularly tasty, getting in there trying to do some good damage. And the Liberators chaffing up or sitting on an objective, with them only being 90 points. Usually the enemy is going to have to dedicate more points than that to get rid of them. I can't think of many 90-point units in the game that would like their chances of beating the 5 Liberators in a fight. So anything that's more significant is obviously taking it away from my more important units. So that is the plan. My battle tactics, by the way, are Master the Paths and Restless Energy. So they're the ones that start with killing an enemy hero and taking an objective off the enemy, which are usually fairly straightforward. Stormcast have a better chance than certain armies at taking out enemy heroes, even if they're hiding, with the various teleporting and the dropping out of the heavens abilities that Stormcast have. So, round 1. Cyclic shifts. So you can see there are some pairs of objectives on this one, and for scoring, control 1 objective for 5, 2 or more objectives for 3, so most of the points are just from doing that, and then another 2 if you control more than your opponent, so you don't really have to worry about the pairs for scoring. But in the underdog bonus, then the pair is actually relevant, because you can just switch off a pair of objectives if you're the underdog, which is quite a big underdog bonus to have. And it's Kharadron Overlords. We don't see a lot of those on the channel. There aren't too many people playing them at events that I've been to. There are certain armies that we see a lot. We see a lot of the various different kinds of orcs, I think. We see an awful lot of chaos. And what else do we see? Soulblight Gravelords, we see quite a lot of those. Stormcast mirror matches, plenty of them. Not too many Kharadron Overlords though. So, let me crack open that list. Okay, I've got it open here. So you can see I've got my ranged fragile units off the table and in the sky because I don't want them to be shot into oblivion by all this horribleness. I would rather drop down and do my own shooting and then maybe get a double turn and shoot again, would be the dream. But that's not necessarily going to be possible early in the game because I'm 4 drops and most armies are less than that, so I'm not going to be able to choose whether to go first or second, but I will get a reroll on priority later in the game. So we have got, let's have a look at the Kharadron Overlords. We have got some heroes sprinkled around in here, very stylish paintwork on these. I believe my opponent actually bought the army like this, already painted though. So we've got, it is the Endrinier's Guild Expeditionary Force. It is, the battle tactics are Restless Energy and Wrathful Cycles. There is an Arcanaut Admiral who's the general with Shrewd Opportunist and Celestium Burst Grenade. There is the Ironclad, which is of course the big boat, right smack in the middle there. There is a unit of Endrin Riggers, a Grundstock Thunderers unit, both of those are reinforced, and then there's 4 of the short range weapons, 4 of the long range weapons. There is a Navigator, who I believe is somewhere down here, I'll find in a second, and we've also got the Frigate, which is there on the left, and there is a battle ram on there, so the Frigate can take units in on the charge with it. And another unit of Endrin Riggers reinforced, and then a unit of Sky Wardens reinforced. So, we've got some Endrin Riggers over on this side, on the right flank. We've got some more of those here. And then, actually, I don't know which one's which, because they all look like Riggers to me. So I don't know which ones are actually the Sky Wardens. There's probably some way of telling them apart, but I'm not sure. Either way, the Endrin Riggers are the ones that can heal the boats, and the Wardens are not. Then, there's the Thunderers. There's the character there. So I think that one is the Admiral there, and that means that the Navigator is unaccounted for. So, the Navigator's got to be hiding down here somewhere in one of the photos. Actually, I think the Navigator is there. I can see the beer. The Kharadron Ale, which is the hand of the Navigator right there. So I think he's actually on that objective or next to it. So 2 drops, that army. And let's go back to the wide shot a second. So, as you can see, I suspect that my opponent, if given the opportunity, would choose to go first, move forward, and just blast some of my units into smithereens. So I've put the Stardrake quite far back, out of peril of certain units that might try to come and shoot it to death. The Thunderers and the Ironclad are obviously a dangerous combo, but if you can get into combat with some of these things, then many of them either don't have shooting combat or are way less effective when doing so, because not all their weapons have shooting combat, for example. So if we can lock some of these up, but I'm going to have to survive some shooting to get to them, and there is going to be some horrible covering fire, no doubt. But a Liberator screen at the front, there is some kind of boat teleporting shenanigans that can happen, so I'm not going to let it get too close to the Stardrake, for instance. And I'm towing onto various objectives. I've got Liberators ready to dive onto this one as well. So, all the ranged stuff in the sky and the Annihilators, as you can imagine, that's the usual setup, and 1 unit of Liberators in the sky as well, because I might want to drop them down later on. And they might just get shot to death otherwise. So pre-game, my opponent has some extra moves, so we've got some of these guys with the balloons moving forward. I've quest marked the objective that has the Navigator on it, by the way. And then first turn, these guys are gunning for the Liberators. Brand new, freshly painted Liberators, will they get murdered in game 1? This unit here are the ones that are the Vindictor models, but I used the spare Liberator parts from the Liberator kit on them to turn them into Liberators, because Vindictors aren't very good, and I wanted 3 new units instead of just 2. On the other side, we've got more balloons going for the Questors, so this is going to be interesting. The Frigate is going for the Liberators on this side, who are in front of the Stardrake. And, well, the Ironclad and the Thunderers blast away and take down 4 of the Questors, who generally like to start on the table because they want to quest mark an objective and near the teleporter so they can teleport to it and still have their once per game teleport available. So that's why they're generally in this position, and also towing on an objective. But in this instance, they have taken a lot of shooting damage, despite all-out defense against some of it, and then they're killed outright, which I believe was just from shooting. Well, that's not very nice. The Liberators on the left lose 2 to the shooting attacks from the Frigate and the other balloonies, and the Stardrake takes some wounds as well. Over on this side, there is a wound dished out from the Endrin Riggers into the Liberators there, and then they've charged in to try and finish the job. They do manage to kill a whole unit of Liberators as well, so good job for them. And we're down Liberators and we're down Questors already. Now, it's not as bad as you might think, because a unit of 3 Questor Soulsworn can just come back to life. It stops me using it on a different unit later though, but those 3 Questors could of course appear on their objective immediately, because no one's guarding it. And my opponent gets a full 20 points for ticking both of the battle tactics in round 1. Well, not the best start, but the enemy are kind of spread out, and I feel like I've got some good places to land, because they're, when I say spread out, they're compact but in multiple different places. So it's not like they've got one unit here, one here, spaced out, so I've got nowhere to land. I could land back there, I could land on the objective, I could land on this objective, land here, and be equidistant between 2 different forces, so if something redeploys away, charge into a different one. I think I've got some good options. Turn 1 for me. So, Long Strikes and Night Judicator drop in. We've also got the Purple Sun out, and the Stardrake has ploughed in to try and kill the Endrin Riggers or Sky Wardens that were perched on this objective. The Liberators have gone in there as well. I put Finest Hour on the Stardrake, and it had a 5+ ward save because I lost a unit in the previous turn. Sent that in, killed all of the infantry, and also got stuck into the boat a little bit. I decided to focus mostly on the left-hand side and try and deal with this manageable chunk. And then if the enemy wants to come and get the Stardrake, or anything else that's over here, they have to go to within range of all my units now, or all the powerful ones. The Annihilators dropped in with the aim of maybe charging this unit onto the on the objective and taking it off them, but they do not make their charge, but they're quite happy to drop in next to the teleport chamber, because then they can just bounce away later if this unit, for example, flees after I've taken the objective back. The Knight Relictor teleports onto the empty objective in the top right, and the 3 Questors do come back to life on their favourite objective, where they will have a ward save. And, ooh, that's a bit of a blurry photo. I've noticed that with this new phone I have to wait that extra second for the camera to focus at long range on things. Optimus D says, wouldn't it be better to have more units on the table at the start to give them more targets and some models to respond? That's definitely one option. The way I was looking at it was there's so much firepower that they're going to be able to engage on multiple fronts and kill a lot of what's already on the table. I mostly put expendable things up at the front, and anything that I definitely don't want to be targeted by any shooting was just off the table. So none of my shooting units can stand up to that much punishment, so they just need to be off the table until they're ready to fire, in my opinion. And then the 1 unit of extra Liberators, it's tough to decide whether to have an extra screen, which I didn't feel was as big a deal in this game, because it's not like the enemy are trying to get into combat with me, and having a unit that you can just keep in reserve and then drop down, because there's not much that the enemy can leave behind on objectives in this list. They kind of have to stick around with the boats. So I'm thinking there's going to be spaces opening up for them to drop in somewhere later, and I just didn't want to give my opponent too much that they could kill early in the game, was my thinking there. But there is definitely some validity in having more stuff on the table at the start. So, I managed to take an objective off my opponent for a little turn 1 tactic, and 13 points for me because I don't hold quite as many objectives as my opponent did. However, I do get the fabled double turn. So, you can see that the Stardrake has devoured the frigate. Along with the long strikes and the Knight Judicator, it had a bad time. Now, at this stage, I was thinking, generally, people want to give Stormcast the first turn, because you don't want to get doubled by Stormcast, because they can drop down near you, and if they fail their charges, they get a second bite at them, they get a second shot with their dangerous teleporting shooting units that can drop in near you. But in this instance, I think maybe I can understand it, because if you're the Kharadron Overlords, you don't want the Stormcast immediately dropping on you turn 1 and throwing all kinds of horrible charges and shooting at you before you get to do anything and pinning you back, kind of. So I can understand that as well, but in general I just would prefer not to give Stormcast a double turn if I'm facing them. You can see the Liberators and the Stardrake cleaning up there. The Questers came in from the top. They left their favourite objective, came down here to kill the... Was it the Navigator that was there, or the Admiral? I think it was the Navigator. The Knight Relictor is moving off this objective because it has actually been switched off, I think, these two objectives. Because I took the double, my opponent became the underdog, and that was something I had to consider as well when taking the turn, the double turn. You make your opponent the underdog, and they can turn off two objectives. So this pair has now been turned off, the two flank objectives, that one. So, I've dropped down some Liberators back there. They were aiming to charge into the Ironclad to try and tie that up, because it's nowhere near as good under those circumstances, but they didn't make their charge. And over on this side, the Annihilators moved on to the objective, and the Endrin Riggers just moved away wisely. So, with the double turn, I've taken out one of the boats and one of the fighting units. There's still a significant enemy force left, but to get to my more fragile units has to go via the Stardrake as well, which maybe isn't that tempting a prospect. And I've got a lot of units in a lot of places. The enemy are mostly in this little bundle here. There's only one unit out there, and that's it. So, can they be everywhere at once to score points now? What do you think the Kharadron Overlords should do from here? Do you think they should focus in and try and kill, for instance, the Stardrake? Even though that then puts them in range to be shot at later by all my shooting units here. I haven't brought the Vigilors in yet, so there's still more stuff to come down as well. So only 8 points for me, because it was a double, but I thought it was worth it to just clear out this flank, and now I feel like I've got a pretty good surrounding situation going on. Into the enemy turn 2. One of the Endrin Riggers rallies back to life. So does the Stardrake, rallies more wounds. And we've got 2 units of them going for the Shield Annihilators, which is risky, of course, because Shield Annihilators can put you on strike last when you charge them, if I can roll a 6 on 6 dice. The Ironclad and the Thunderers are going for the Liberators at the top, it seems, although they're not really planning to shoot the Liberators with everything they've got. I think just the short-range weapons. So Stardrake takes some shooting, takes 4 wounds. The Liberators get charged by the Ironclad, who I believe wants to... I think it may have been a battle tactic, actually. I think there's a tactic that requires like half the army to be in combat or something. So we've got all the balloon fellas going in, except this one doesn't make its charge. Fails about a 5-inch charge. The other unit does get in, but I managed to put strike last on them and kill some of them first. And yeah, so the enemy didn't accomplish much that turn, and I feel like maybe the battle tactic was being chased a bit too much there, and it maybe hindered the output towards where it should have been going, which was over here, potentially. So, 13 points for the enemy, so I'm still behind, but I think I've got a good bit of an advantage now. Got a lot of juicy shooting units here. Stardrake can try and get into the Ironclad. The Ironclad's already locked up in combat with these Liberators that it didn't finish off. So, my opponent takes the double. And I'm then able to turn off 2 objectives. So I turn off the one that the Ironclad is on and the one near my portal, which the enemy have kind of domination over that area. If we go back to the wide shot there, this one here, got these balloonies that could just go in there if they want. So I've turned off those 2. And this one is quite tricky for the enemy to get to. These balloon lads could go up there, but they probably wouldn't succeed with the charge, so they wouldn't be able to take that one. And this one has got a Stardrake on it. So I turn off this pair. So let's see what the Kharadron Overlords can do with a double turn. What they really need to do is shoot down those Liberators with the Thunderers, so the Ironclad can then shoot at something more significant, because the Ironclad's kind of stuck in combat now. So you really don't want to get this thing into combat with anything it isn't going to kill. We've got double attack from all the Sky Wardens into the final Annihilator there. By the way, this is something that came up quite a bit at the event. Do you count down or up on wounds when you're marking them on a unit? Because the way the rules are written for these games, it uses phrases like damage allocated to. So I can understand when there's a point of damage, you put something representing that damage onto the unit. However, I think that that is presenting information to your opponent that is completely useless. What I think the dice should be for is showing how much health there is remaining on the unit, because your opponent then knows how much damage they need to do to kill it. And just showing the damage just shows you nothing at all unless you know how many wounds the unit started with. So something like a big boat, I would much rather present, if it starts with 20 for instance, I would rather, after losing 2, have 18 there so my opponent can see how close it is to death. But the way the rules are written does suggest that you should mark how much damage it's taken, and there's certain other rules like once it has taken 10 points of damage, such and such happens. So I can understand marking it that way because they've written it, in my opinion, backwards. Then they should be writing it when it only has however much remaining, and then you could always just count down on the dice. Because I don't want to have to constantly ask how many wounds an enemy unit has. Even though I can see the damage marked on it, I have no idea how much is left, so I have to keep asking that. Whereas if the dice is there, you know just by looking how much damage you need to do to kill it. So that's my preference, although it seems like I'm in the minority, particularly in the Age of Sigmar community. So whenever you see the dice next to my units, it's always to mark how much damage is remaining. When you see it on my opponent's units, it's usually marking how much has been taken. So you just have to be consistent. So some shooting is going to be happening, but it was very ineffective because the Thunderers could not kill the Liberators that were in combat with the Ironclads. The Ironclad is unable to do much shooting at all. So 5 points for the KO, and that was not a very successful double turn. Now into my turn 3. The Knight Judicator, the long strikes who can run and shoot, of course. The Vigilors drop down, the Questers and the Stardrake get stuck in, the Liberators, the Purple Sun, more Liberators, everyone just gets stuck in and murders the Ironclad. Still a few Thunderers left, but not many. And the Balloon Boys in the bottom right there do manage to kill off the final Annihilator. So it's looking like a pretty decisive win for the Stormcast at this stage. Once you can get those boats locked down in combat, they tend to struggle. So a big 15-point turn for me there. And then in the enemy turn, the balloons are just going to start spreading out a bit, trying to pick up some points, and then the last remaining ones up there get eaten by the Stardrake. So my opponent is able to pick up a nice chunk of points there, but then in my turn I'm just going to be able to have all the objectives set up for tactics tick off the next part of these tactics for holding every objective in enemy territory, and for having more friendly units in neutral territory than enemy units, or if there's no neutral territory, no enemy units in friendly territory. So 20 points there for me for picking up the 2 tactics. I then give away the turn, because if I take the double, I wouldn't be able to do any battle tactics in the last round, and I think I can finish both of them. So in the enemy turn, moving around a bit but can't do much, and scores a few points, 8 points. And in my turn, I can try and get every objective, but I don't quite manage that, but I do get units into every corner, which is the final part of Master the Paths. So, that is a juicy win for the Stormcast to kick things off. The final victory point total, and if there's any discrepancy between the photo and what I'm reading out from Malarkey here, then that would be unfortunate. But it's 71 points to 59. And the score is actually a lot closer than the game felt. There was that one moment at the start, obviously, where the questers got killed, and it was looking a bit dicey for a moment, but I always felt, especially once the Ironclad got stuck in combat with the Liberators, which I don't think it should have been doing, but as soon as it did that, it felt comfortable. It didn't feel like there was much coming back at me. Okay, into the next round. Surge of Slaughter. So the way this one works, you get 5 victory points for controlling 1, 3 for controlling any pairs, and 2 if you control more than your opponent. So you want 1 objective and a pair to get good points here. So we've got pairs that way, and then 1 more in the middle. And for the underdog bonus, then you can add rend to friendly units' melee weapons while they're contesting the target's pair of objectives. So it's not as significant as turning off objectives, but it can still be good. Now, this is, let me pull up the list here, on Malarkey. It is Seraphon, and when we get the close-ups, and there'll be more photos of this army later, it's a very cool Cthulian Seraphon army. And let me go through it all. You can see some of the tentacles already. Look at this temple. So it is the Sunclaw Star Host, 3 drops, Morbid Conjuration, Law of Celestial Manipulation, Restless Energy, and Intercept and Recover. So I'm going to have to pick 3 of my units to not get killed. There is a Slan Starmaster, who is right here. Looking very cool indeed. That's the General. There is a unit of Hunters of Huanchi with Starstone Bowlers. They are going to be hiding out at the start of the game and not deployed on the table. 2 units of 3 Croxigor. There's one there. And where's the other one? One there, and... Right, I'm going to go back now. Where are the other Croxigor? There they are, all the way out on the left in the obscuring terrain there. Then, in the 2nd Regiment, there's the Scourge of Gairan, Saurus Old Blood on Carnosaur, which is this very, very cool model there. That has incandescent retrices. I don't know what these things do, by the way. Ancient Defender, Being of the Stars. So basically, it's very dangerous. And it always seems like good value, the Carnosaur. Especially the Scourge of Gairan one, I think, which is 320 points. Agrodon Lancers, which is the big scary Saurus cavalry unit here. That is a reinforced unit, so 420 points, so a significant unit there. We've got the Sunblood Pack, which is, I think, the Underworld's warband. And they have a bit of a buff that they give out to nearby units. Is it the one where they ignore damage? Is that what they do? I can't remember if it's them that do that. But either way, little warband there. And then there are 2 units of Saurus warriors, one out on this side and one on the right there in front of the temple. The temple, of course, can target terrain features, I believe, and send out mortal wounds from them, so I don't want to be setting up too close to terrain that's within range of this thing. So let's go back to the wide shot and talk about the strategy here. The enemy don't have the same ranged threat, obviously, as the Kharadron Overlords. So I've got some Liberators starting on the table, mainly for objective purposes. I've got my characters out here. Got the Star Drake on the table as well. The Questers next to the Teleporter as usual. Nothing too weird about the deployment here. There is some potential speed from the enemy. There's some cavalry, a Carnosaur, and obviously with magic from the Slan there's going to be all kinds of horribleness coming from there. But I've set up most of the stuff miles away from the enemy faction terrain. And in the sky we have got Vigilors, Night Adjudicator, Annihilators, Long Strikes, and more Liberators. The enemy, of course, have a little unit there, the Hunters. And for Intercept and Recover, I have chosen the Liberators out on the right, on their own, as treasure carriers, and my 2 foot heroes. I feel like it's going to be easier to keep these 2 safe from the enemy. And the Liberators are more of bait. If the enemy want to go over there and fight Liberators, instead of fighting what I care about, then I'll just accept that they can have the 5 points. So, and did I tell you how many drops it was? It was 3 drops. So my opponent has thrust me into the position of going first, which is probably wise. You don't want to get doubled by the Stormcast. The Star Drake is going to be quite cautious and not go too wildly close to the enemy. The Star Drake can be a bit more reckless against combat armies because it's got the Quicksilver, so it can strike first once per game. The Annihilators drop down right in the middle and say, would you like to come and charge me at some point, and maybe I'll put strike last on you. Long Strike's also dropping down there so I can shoot the enemy, and then also they have the opportunity to use covering fire if the enemy wants to come down here and fight, so a little bit aggressive with them. Also, because they're in range of a Warrior Chamber unit with Thunderhead Host, which is the sub-faction, I don't know if I mentioned, then Warrior Chamber units can get +1 to hit if they are wholly within 12 of the Long Strikes. They're the only unit I've got that can actually apply it to another unit. Sauruses going for the Questors down here, possibly, but the Questors have teleported up there to try and get on their favourite objective. If I move too close to this piece of terrain, then there's some kind of debuffs going on, so I don't want to necessarily charge them, but I probably will try anyway just to get onto my ward save. And so I've laid down a bit of a gauntlet here. If the enemy want to come and fight the Questors, I can live with that. If they don't move quite close enough, I can redeploy onto the objective and get my ward save. And the Annihilators are really an invitation to be charged. So let's see how the enemy reacts. 7 points for me, round 1. Into the enemy turn. Proxigor and Saurus unit going for the Questers. But I think they do actually leave a tiny little crevice where the Questers can dip their toe onto the objective after we've got the sticks out to measure. And an upside down picture of the Annihilators about to be charged by the cavalry and the Carnosaur, which would be quite dangerous. So you can see I was able to redeploy, and there was just that tiny little fraction of the template there. We put the 3-inch sticks down to see if there was any space for me to land in, and there was just that tiny little corner there, so they will actually get their ward save now. And the Star Drake takes a bit of shooting from this unit, but the annoying thing about them is that they debuff you whenever they target you with their shooting. And I think it's one of those you'll get less distance on your charge type deals. So Star Drake has been shot by the bowlers. And we've got cavalry gunning for the Annihilators, so there they go. They smash in there with the Carnosaur. The Saurus and the Proxigor go into the Questors. And we'll see if I pay for my aggression of staking a claim on these 2 objectives early in the game, trying to taunt the enemy into charging me so that I can then strike back at them. You can see one of the cavalry got killed by the covering fire as well. And they also have strike last put on them, which I represented by just putting that dice there. So strike last for the cavalry. The Carnosaur will obviously be able to go. 3 of the questers get killed. The Annihilators managed to take out one of the cavalry, and they've spread out a bit with their pylons so that the enemy can't do any sneaky piling into the long strikes, because this, I think it's the sub-faction, has the ability to do extra pylons and maybe drag other units into combat. So the Annihilators do start taking damage. They do have all-out defense up, but they do lose a couple as the enemy swing back. And Questers knocked down to 2. I think that's after the pile-in damage. The Annihilators knocked down to 3, which means that the Carnosaur can actually pile in and touch the long strikes. Now, even though I said that I was setting up my +1 to hit on the Annihilators, I did totally forget about it for, I believe, the entire tournament after that point. So I intentionally was putting the long strikes close to them, but then from that point, from that turn, I never remembered about the sub-faction ever again during the whole event. So, no more buffs from the long strikes being nearby. So the enemy has chosen not to tangle with the Star Drake too much this round, other than trying to slow it down. So 12 points for the enemy in that turn. And the Annihilators are wiped out as well, which is not great. I do have my Purple Sun in there, which is going to pin this thing down, hopefully. So I get the first crack at round 2 and scored 5 points, because you can see we've got the Vigilors, the Knight Judicator, and hold on, I zoomed through that a bit too fast, didn't I? So the Annihilator went down, the Questors have gone down as well, and the Star Drake chased after the enemy, but they redeployed away and I wasn't able to charge them. So I've got all my shooting units down. We've got some, actually the Questors don't die, they teleport away to safety. They teleport over here instead to try and give me more units to get involved in this fight, but the Annihilator does not survive, so it's just the Purple Suns in there. Surrounded all my shooting this area, but did not really do enough damage this turn, sadly. And it's not looking too great numbers-wise at the moment. I'm down the Annihilators, I'm down most of the Questors. So we'll see how it goes, but not the greatest of starts there. So just 5 points for me. And into the enemy turn. The Purple Sun is removed. But, what's this? The Carnosaur that was almost dead. I do a bit of counter spell, a bit of counter lightning blast with the Knight Arcanum and kill it in the enemy hero phase. So that's a cheeky little bonus there. So that's going to get me my battle tactic for killing a hero in my next turn now, because an enemy has been killed. This cavalry unit now has choices to make. You're obviously going to want to hit some of these shooting units, but you are going to have to eat some covering fire from them as well. The Saurus unit are just camped on the quest-marked objective to hold that down. Saurus cavalry spreading themselves amongst these units to try and hit as many of them as possible. And we've got Sauruses going after the Star Drake, which I would not recommend. The 2 Questors that teleported away from the Kroxigor now get charged by them again. And the cavalry charge into the Vigilors, who aren't too bad at fighting. The Star Drake munches a load of the Saurus unit, and does he actually kill all of them? I think he does. Yes, the Star Drake just killed all those Sauruses, so they did not think that they'd made a great choice there when they were all being eaten. Questors and Kroxigor still fighting. The cavalry do manage to kill off the Knight Judicator and the Vigilors, sadly. So, I've killed that Saurus unit. Other than that, I'm looking a bit thin on the ground here. So what can I do with a Star Drake, 2 units of the Liberators, a Wizard, and 1 unit to come back to life? It's not looking great. So I'm going to have to start playing, weird to say, but I'm going to have to start playing properly. Start trying to play the game rather than the battle. Rather than getting stuck in and trying to fight things, I'm going to have to actually look strategically to try and score and deny points, because I don't have much left, so that's the only option at this stage. So, The Kroxigor and the Questers are still fighting there. The enemy in the lead. Into my turn though, I get the 5+ ward on the Star Drake because one of my units died in the previous turn, and then I throw it into combat with... Or was it already in combat? There may have been a couple of Sauruses left. And actually they're not, I think these are the Hunters. Are they? Are they Hunters or Saurus? Maybe a couple of Sauruses were left down there. And I think I was able to pile in, maybe, and hit this warband as well. I've also got some Liberators up there, smacking the Purple Sun around, and they mostly just wanted to punch this unit. Just trying to kill as much as possible so the enemy have less units to score with. Because the big units I'm not going to be able to get, so I can get the small ones. I bring 3 fresh Annihilators back and drop them down here. And then I charge the Shackles, which were placed there, because I didn't quite have enough to reach the Slan, which would be good. And I've teleported the Knight Relictor up into the corner where it's safe to protect the treasure, and also to give me a teleporting unit and someone positioned maybe for battle tactics later. The Liberators, I put Finest Hour on them and then forgot to charge them in to join in with the fight hilariously. And these Liberators guarding the treasure, just hanging out as far away from the enemy as possible. The one Quester has defeated the Kroxigor, you may have noticed. So, I managed to collect 2 battle tactic nuggets this time, because I killed an enemy hero in their enemy turn, and I took an objective off my opponent, which is this one, with the Liberators. 20-point round. So that's potentially very good, although I'm clearly running out of units. Turn 3 for the enemy. And I throw up the Shackles onto the Cavalry to try and slow them down, to prevent them reaching my Wizard, maybe. But I don't actually roll high enough to do that, so they're going after the Liberators now. The Kroxigor are coming in to attack the Star Drake, which is a risk, because they could be eaten. I think they have 6 wounds each, so I could roll 3 6s and just devour them. I redeploy the Liberators to get away from the Cavalry. However, they roll an 11 on the charge, which is exactly what they needed to reach me after the 6-inch redeploy. So that may have been a waste. The Star Drake is murdering Kroxigor and not taking too much damage, and it's the enemy that keep throwing themselves into the Star Drake that he's killing, so he's not been able to move very much, but the fact the enemy keep coming to attack him means he's been able to kill lots of them. The Liberators do go down, giving up their precious treasure. The Annihilators destroy the Shackles as well. And that is the end of that turn. So I'm still down on numbers, slightly. But if we look at the split of the table, all the enemy powerful stuff is on this side. All my powerful stuff is on this side. So it's kind of even in that way. 12-point turn for the enemy. So that massive turn has really helped me there. Big scoring. I get the priority and go first into the next round. The Star Drake is just going to try and eat everything around it. Down here I've put the Purple Sun out to keep the Cavalry away from my Wizard, who has the other treasure, who then goes through the teleport chamber, I believe, into the corner up there with the Knight Relictor, where they should both be safe. We've got Liberators fighting, we've got Annihilators getting into the Sauruses, we've got the Questers, who rallied one of them back, which is why there's 2 of them now. And then they went up and charged into the Saurus unit as well, managing to get onto the objective, where they get their ward save and also a bonus to control score. And with that, they actually take the objective off the enemy. The Annihilators obviously hitting them from the other side did some good damage as well. So suddenly, it's turned a little bit now, this game, because I now have this objective. And with that, I'm able to score 10. I don't think I've got any battle tactic nuggets that round though, so I've still got more of those to try for in the next turn. And the Cavalry is so far away from anything that it's feeling pretty good. Into the enemy turn though, and they're moving towards to try and charge the Purple Sun, and then maybe they could get round here to score something. The Gravetide pops up, is going to try and get the Annihilators, the Kroxigor going for them as well. I'm not sure whether it's a fresh... I think it may be a fresh unit of Kroxigor from the ones that I killed before have come back. Because obviously this game has lots of units popping up back to life after you murder them. Which is one thing I dislike, actually, about Age of Sigmar. I think it slows the game down too much, and I think it's too much of a feel-bad mechanic. I don't agree with game design that undoes things that your opponent has done, and I don't agree with game design that stops enemy units from acting. So, examples of that would be Be'lakor pointing at the enemy. I don't think that's good, and they obviously know that it's very good because you can only do it once per game. I think the fact that it doesn't have a dice roll attached to it, it makes it worse, but I just think the idea of designing rules that prevent the enemy from doing anything, I think is just bad. I think the rules should make it more difficult for the enemy to do things. I think, like, minus something from your charge, minus something to hit is way less feel bad than your unit just can't do anything. And I think healing is just annoying in general. I think just give things more wounds and less healing, in my opinion. I've still got this objective because one Questor is still alive, so with the bonus to control score, I'm going to be keeping this. And I've still got this one up here. So, the big, powerful cavalry unit and the Slann are still up, but they're not really engaging with my army too much. So only 5 points for the enemy there. Very disappointing round, not able to take this objective off me despite the Kroxigor coming in to fight, and didn't make the charge into the Purple Sun, so nothing going on down here, and they're maybe regretting even going for it. I get first crack at round 5. The Liberators are just string out a bit because they're trying to... I don't know whether there's anyone there for them to fight, but the Stardrake gets onto the middle objective. The Quester manages to kill off the final Saurus. So I'm not going to be able to take every objective on the table, but I do think I complete the units. Do I get the units in the corners? I don't know if I get that. Because I've got them. I think there was just another part that I hadn't done previously, though. Was it like take all the objectives in enemy territory? And this one technically counts since it's on the middle line. So I think that's what I got the 5 points for. All the objectives in enemy territory, which are those 3. Then into my opponent's turn, the cavalry and the Slann just getting objectives. Trying to anyway, and the Kroxigor. But they don't make any of their charges, because the Stardrake redeployed a little bit away from them. 5 points for the enemy. So, as you can see, didn't start off too great, lost a lot of units early on, but then picked up massively there. I managed to score some big points at the end. Premet says... You can hit a weird point where goblins need to be tough enough to be mechanically relevant, but then don't feel like goblins anymore without healing recursion. Yes, I just think they should start designing the game based on things not coming back to life that aren't undead or like demons or something. You can make a case for things like rats coming out of the sewers to join their unit. But I'd just prefer to have more units that can then just pop up or be summoned, rather than units popping up back to life again and healing so much. I think there's a bit too much of that in the game. I just don't think you should design a game that way. It was their choice to do it. I just think it should be designed differently to be more fun. I think positive rules, such as doing cool things, doing cool movement, doing damage to enemies, I think those things are cooler than healing or pointing at the enemy and stopping them moving for a turn. So I think they should design more fun rules rather than just purely negative rules. That's not to say you can't have control armies that are going to limit what the opponent can do, but like I said, I think it should be more like you get negatives to your charge rather than you just aren't allowed to charge. Or if you do charge, you're slightly worse at hitting rather than you're not allowed to hit. Okay, so that was another decent win there. So let me just crack open the page on Malarkey here. So that was 57 points to 41 in favour of the Stormcast. Not a huge scoring game. None of those scores are super high. You do get lots of scores in like the 60s and the 70s. There's even some 80s. Just scrolling down the results from that round here, I can see 2 80s. Okay, into round 3. Creeping Corruption. 5 victory points for controlling 1. 3 for controlling 2, and then 2 if you control more. So mostly you just want to hold 2 objectives and you get a good amount of points throughout the game, and then controlling more just gets you the extra 2 as a bonus. The underdog bonus, pick an objective you control and 1 other objective, and then you draw a line between those 2 objectives and then apply either mortal damage on units crossed by it or add 1 to casting rolls and banishment rolls for units crossed by it. So if you're standing between objectives or right on the middle of an objective, potentially you can have wounds put onto you. And it is a Stormcast mirror match. Bum bum bum. So let me open up that list here. It is Sentinels of the Bleak Citadel, which means there's going to be a 5+ ward save for which units? I think it's going to be the Knight of Zeros and the Prosecutors are the only ones who can use that. So it is the Knight of Zeros, by the way, not Taunus the Redeemed. So let me go over there. We've got the Knight of Zeros represented by Taunus, which is funny because I've been using the Knight of Zeros to represent Taunus. So maybe they've just switched armor. There is also Yndrasta, who is in the sky. Let's see. There's Yndrasta in the sky. She comes with Ether Wings, Reinforced Prosecutors, and Reinforced Long Strikes. So Long Strikes reinforced, more powerful than my Long Strikes because there's twice as many of them. There's also a unit of Vigilors who are in the next regiment with the Lord Veritant, who is down there. I think he can actually get the ward save as well. There is the Knight of Zeros with Hour of Glory for constant finest hour. There is the Storm Coven, which are in the top right on an objective there, as you'd expect, so they can get their double cast. I've been enjoying the Storm Coven lately. I couldn't squeeze them into this list because of the units I wanted to put in there. There is the Portal, of course, and there's Regiment of Renown, the Skyport Profiteers. So you get a code right and 2 units of Thunderers, and they can do a little bit of teleporting around, I think. So nice little twist on the Stormcast there. So some similarity between the list. We both have Vigilors, both some Long Strikes, just different numbers, and other than that, there's not a lot that's the same, really. Mostly different units. And obviously both these Stormcast lists are doing well up till this point. I think you could probably make at least 4 competitive or somewhat competitive Stormcast lists that don't have any units in common. I don't think that would be wild to suggest that's possible. Because you've got the big dragons, you have got the Annihilator type builds, you've got the cavalry builds, 2 different types of cavalry, so that's almost 2 lists on its own. You've got good shooting units. You have got spamming the cheap Liberator type units. What else have we got access to? Got like Stormdrake Guard in those sort of lists. Yeah, I think I'm confident in saying you could do probably 4 with no units in common, and they would all still be reasonable lists, which I don't think most of the armies in the game would be able to say that. So, what is my plan here? Well, the enemy has more dangerous shooting in a single unit than I do with the Long Strikes. Yndrasta is also potentially a nightmare. Yndrasta and 6 Long Strikes will devour a Stardrake in one go. So, the Stardrake, I do want to start it on the table though, because I want it to get a ward save. So I'm not starting it in the sky. I'm not going to be quite that cautious. But I think you can see I've got my shooting units in the sky. I've got the Annihilators in the sky. All the Liberators are on the table because I want to screen out the enemy from deep striking after me. Obviously the enemy are considering that a little bit as well because the Prosecutors are right at the back with Ether Wings as a screen. So it's going to be interesting. We've both got very strong units waiting to appear on the table who don't want to be the first one to drop in because then the enemy will drop in and get the first shot away. So it's interesting to see how cautious we're going to be. My opponent has less drops than me though, so forces me to go first, which you don't want because you want to be able to double with this army. The Questers decide to be quite aggressive and go after the Storm Coven because there's not much else over there. So I might as well just drop them in, try and get onto their favourite objective early. The Stardrake is hiding in the corner, guarded by Liberators. And I noticed that my opponent's objective rings are a little bit crinkly here. which is possibly something that happens with these. That I don't think they're the most expensive material that GW use for their objective markers. I've got some prayer points on the Knight Relictor there. Liberators and the Purple Sun, just trying to screen out where anything horrible could land. There's only so much you can do though, because Prosecutors in Yndrasta with a 3 dice charge, they're going to be able to get about a bit. So, cautious opening except for the Questors. And if the enemy want to drop down and kill the Questors, that's only a 200 point unit. And that means you've dropped down something significant before I have. So it means maybe you've put long strikes here, which I don't think you want to do, because then I will just drop down and kill them. So I don't think the enemy are going to try and punish this too much. It's like a game of chess, but instead of throwing out a pawn, which would be the Liberators, I've thrown out like a knight to tempt the enemy to try and take it with a queen. So we'll see if that happens. 8 points for me. The enemy decide that it's time to bring in some Prosecutors from the corner. They went through the teleportal, and they're going to try and charge somebody with a 3 dice charge. The Ether Wings are going to try and nick this objective, and some Thunderers have been teleported to try and shoot down the Liberators that are currently holding it. The Storm Coven move forward to stop me redeploying onto the objective. As you can see, they're beyond the centre of it, which means there isn't going to be any spot where I could redeploy onto, because of the size of the base and the size of the objective and all that. The Vigilors then drop in behind. Now, I'll mention this now while I remember. Somehow, my opponent and I managed to confuse each other massively here. So, I think the triggering incident hasn't happened yet, but I'll mention that when it comes up as well. Marking damage up or down, which I was talking about earlier. My opponent was marking damage taken, I'm marking damage remaining. But because we had some kind of miscommunication regarding the attack into this wizard here, the dice I put down was accurate for both of our interpretations. My opponent assumed that I was marking damage up, so damage taken, and I was marking damage down, because I believed that I'd taken 2 wounds, and my opponent thought I'd taken 4. So the number I put there was actually correct from both of our perspectives, which led to my opponent thinking that I was counting damage taken on this one, and damage remaining on this unit. So when I removed a model from this unit, my opponent was confused by how much damage there was left on the dice, because it seemed to be inconsistent based on what was happening with this guy. So at the time, I couldn't understand what my opponent was getting at, because I thought everything I was doing was just consistent and fine. But when we then came to the next time this unit took damage, and I was changing the dice, we then didn't agree on how much damage should have been applied to this unit previously. But I didn't think it was a hill that was worth dying on, because I remembered it being 2 damage taken, my opponent remembered it being 4, and it was marked in such a way that we both thought that was correct, if that makes sense to anybody. So I decided, you know what, let's just say it's 4 damage taken, that's fine. And then I cleared up the fact that I do show damage remaining on the model. But that was a moment where it was just baffling, because we were like repeating the same things to each other and not understanding, not getting it, because from our perspective everything was fine, and it was the other person who was saying something weird because of that miscommunication regarding the amount of damage this guy takes in a minute. So, anyway, you can see that I all-out defense this hero to try and keep it alive, which is important because my opponent has the same battle tactics as me, so wants to kill a hero early in the game. However, you can see there, only does, in my opinion, 2 damage. My opponent was believing that there was 4 damage inflicted here. And I then murder some of the Prosecutors back as well. So, 8 points each. I choose to give away the turn now. So, I don't think my opponent is going to be able to accomplish much with the double turn here, because it's the same situation of not wanting to drop things in, and maybe my opponent would be even more hesitant to drop significant units in, knowing that I could have a double turn coming up. So I would rather be the one that has the potential of a double and force my opponent to keep the priority and have to go first, because then if it keeps going and we haven't dropped anything and we get into round 3 where you've got to bring things in, then my opponent will have to drop them down before me. So we'll see if my opponent drops anything significant onto the table, knowing I've still got all my good stuff in the sky. The Stardrake is also quite safe at the moment as well, locked in the corner there with Liberators guarding it. So I'm not too concerned. There's not really any place to land near it, because there's questers there. You can't land here. You'd have to land like there, and Yndrasta, even with the 3 dice charge, isn't going to reach all the way to the Stardrake. So keeping the Stardrake safe was the #1 priority. So giving away the double seemed like a good thing to do at this moment and set myself up for a future double. So giving away the double. The questors, I think I might rally one of them back, possibly, if that's why there's a photo of them. I don't remember. Oh no, one of them gets hit with a spell, actually, and dies, I think. And you can see that the Knight of Zeros is about to get stuck in as well, trying to take an objective off me, no doubt. The Thunderers, which were here, move down here. I think it's a teleport, and they're going to try and shoot the questors. Daniel says, Nurgle is just sad with all that healing and models coming back. Yeah, it's a bit excessive in the game at the moment, in my opinion. But it's obviously, they want the game to be played that way. Maybe they just want you to be able to use your beautifully painted models over and over again within the same game. I think it just feels too bad. So, Yndrasta finds a spot to drop in. Very sneaky Yndrasta down here. Obviously not threatening to the Stardrake right now, but can be threatening to my Knight Arcanum and the Liberators, and maybe taking this objective. But this is what I want, really. I want the enemy to have to drop in significant things when there's nothing really juicy to attack. The questors are taking more damage, and they still can't redeploy onto this because the horrible Storm Coven is sitting there. My Liberators on this side get shot down by the enemy, which isn't very friendly, because the long strikes have dropped in as well, up there on the left. Daniel says they need to change the disease rules. I think there's a lot of things about Age of Sigmar that I would change. Most of the time when they release a faction, and I hear about the rules, I think that's not exactly fun or thematic, or there's usually some complaints that I have about them. Khorne is the usual suspect of their rules not being thematic enough. And the Prosecutors, along with Yndrasta in there as well, managed to get down most of the Liberators, but not enough to take this objective off me because there's still 2 left. And the Knight Arcanum does die now, finally. And I think if I'd been correct that there was only 2 wounds taken, I think it would have actually just lived on 1 wound. And 20 points for my opponents. You might think, why have you just given away the double turn and a 20-point turn? Because I now think that I'm primed to murder the enemy horribly. Because the Stardrake can come out and play. I can bring down my own long strikes, I can bring down my Annihilators and my Vigilors, and I think I can do some serious damage to the enemy now, who have got pretty much everything out on the table now. So, let's go. Turn 2 for me. The Knight Judicator drops in at the back, behind the enemy Vigilors, shoots them, the Questors charge in and fight both them and the Storm Coven on the quest-marked objective. Dropped in 6 Annihilators onto an objective as well, in the middle at the top. The Stardrake gets in, the long strikes shoot away at Yndrasta. The Liberators and the Stardrake combined manage to kill the remaining Prosecutors and Yndrasta, which is great. And I think the Stardrake may have just eaten the Prosecutors and then punched Yndrasta and killed her. So, I didn't go after the enemy long strikes this turn. I decided to just focus on other things, but I think it's looking quite healthy for me at the moment. The Vigilors dropped in back there, because there is actually a little gap between the 2 pieces of terrain, and I fired through that gap to the enemy. My Priest is building up 7 prayer points, but there hasn't been anything I've really wanted to spend them on yet. So, just holding on to them. But it's going quite well murder-wise, and I pick up 2 battle tactics for killing a hero and taking an objective off the enemy. So both get 20-point turns there. And then I get the double. So I feel like this is going to be pretty much game over now. Got the Quester, the Knight Judicator joins in the fight, which is odd, but it's because I wanted to get another model onto the objective to try and take it. Because I will have the bonus to control score for the Quester still being there. You can see the Stardrake goes and kills the Knight Zeros and the Thunderers. The Annihilators are chasing after the enemy, and hold on, let me show you where they were. The Annihilators up here move that way, charge into the faction terrain and destroy it. And the Veritant moved away from them beforehand, but they did demolish the building. Ether Wings are still up. My long strikes moved out and fired at the enemy long strikes, and I think I just killed one. But there's not a lot of enemy Stormcast left now, and I think I'm in a very good position. So 10 points for me. I took the double, so I couldn't do any tactics yet. Turn 3 for the enemy. I think the double, I dealt enough of a decisive blow with the amount of stuff I was able to kill over those 2 turns. Stardrake takes some shooting damage. The Ether Wings move on to the objective, and they're going to try and kill the long strikes by the looks of it. The enemy long strikes pop out and are going to start blasting the Stardrake. Takes some more damage. And the Ether Wings charge into the long strikes, which will stop them shooting unless they want to retreat and maybe take damage. And up here you can see that I've killed the final Vigilor and Storm Coven members. Both of those are dead. And my opponent scores 8 points, so I'm slightly in the lead now. And my opponent takes the double turn into round 4. So let's have a look. With the double turn, what can you accomplish here, enemy Stormcast? You can definitely kill that Stardrake. That's the most important thing. I don't know what else though. If you don't take it, I think you just die. So I think it's the right thing to do. So the Stardrake's going to get shot. 3 fresh Prosecutors are coming back. The enemy long strikes do manage to kill the Stardrake. The Prosecutors get onto the objective with the Liberators. The Prosecutors in the first round, by the way, you probably noticed, didn't do very well. For the whole game, actually, the Prosecutors rolled quite poorly. The Ether Wings are slowly losing to the long strikes, but very slowly. And this one Liberator is still up. So this is the Liberator that was fighting for the whole game against a reinforced unit of Prosecutors and Yndrasta, and is still up after all of those are dead. Then, still continuing there, 8 points for the enemy into my round 4. And I feel like I can score big here, so I throw everything into the Prosecutors there. The Vigilors move in, shooting and fighting. Questors going into the enemy long strikes. We've got the Annihilators just consolidating their position here in the corner, ready for battle tactics, scoring and such. And we've got Liberators charging into the Veritant, and Knight Judicator shooting, applying one of his Griffhounds to the Veritant before shooting as well. And I managed to get the next part of this battle tactic, is control every objective in enemy territory. So a nice 15-point turn there, and then I get the double going into round 5, because I think I can do enough damage that my opponent won't be able to score anything. And I just score another 10 for holding loads of objectives. My opponent then scores 5 for holding 1 objective with the Veritant, and that's the end of the game. So, the final score in that game is 63 points to 49. And it did feel like the big deal was, if we go back to a wide shot here, when the Stardrake was down in this corner, actually, I thought this was a really blurry picture, but actually that side is very crisp. So I haven't quite got to grips with the new phone's focus yet. So I'm sure I can do something about that. So when the Stardrake was safe down here and I was able to give away the double turn, that obviously turned out to be huge, because the enemy ended up putting all the really scary units out the sky before I did, which turned out to be significant, because then I was able to go and kill those fragile hammers and start dominating the table then. So my list is more resilient. The enemy list is a bit more hitty, but obviously glass cannons can't take the kind of punishment they can dish out, whereas my army can take quite a lot of punishment. I've got a decent number of wounds in my army, some quite resilient units. So, into the next round. 3 wins out of 3. Into round 4. Linked ley lines. So at this point, after winning 3 games in a row, going into day 2, you think, okay, I'm probably going to be facing some kind of horrible filth now. If you keep winning, ultimately you will. And I don't remember whether I've ever won my first 4 games at a tournament of Age of Sigmar before in a row. So if I do win this one, that could be the first time that's happened. The only Age of Sigmar event I've won was a mixed doubles event. Other than that, I think I've finished 2nd in a 1-day event. But it's one of those games where if it isn't your sole game system, I feel like it's quite difficult to beat some of the top players. Because it's not the sort of game where you can just turn up and not know what everything does and still have a good chance to win, I think. You have to know the armies you're going to be facing. You have to know your own list and know what you're going to do and plan way ahead. And I don't think I really practice with one list enough to do that. So there are certain players that I normally see at events and think if I face them, there's a very high chance I'm going to lose regardless of what lists we have. Because some of the players are just very good, and it's a game that lends itself to the players that are very good, and you can practice and become an absolute beast. Okay. Well, I said we might be facing some absolute filth. It's 5 Bloodthirsters, which I would not qualify as filth at all. I think, for me, it's actually a very good matchup. I don't think the Bloodthirsters have much of a chance here, unfortunately for them. Stormcast are just really bad time for these multi-Bloodthirster lists. Now, obviously, they are Bloodthirsters, so they can, if they get a lucky roll, they can just explode everything and leave a big crater where the enemy once was. But I think on average they have a tough time against high armor Stormcast who have lots of attacks. The Bloodthirsters don't have the best armor and they don't have a huge amount of wounds like a Mega Gargant. So it's similar to when I see Kragnos in the opposing army. I think, yep, that's something I'm going to kill. Because the Stormcast shooting is obviously very good against heroes, good against the big stuff that can't be obscured as well. So I think the Bloodthirsters are going to have a tough time in this one. But then again, I've only got 3 long strikes, which is the thing they're usually most terrified of. Linked ley lines. So you want to create a line of objectives to score maximum points. 3 for an objective, 3 for 2 or more objectives, 2 for a pair, and 2 if you control all the objectives on a line. So you want a pair, and you want to have the middle one as well. And the underdog bonus is just not very significant, just extra rend for manifestations, or strike first for manifestations. Anti-manifestation rend, I should say. So, let me pull up this Bloodthirster list. Because, obviously, very complicated. There is the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, who is the general with unrivaled battle lust and the crown of Slaughterborn, which is this giant one here. There'll be some close-ups in a minute. In that regiment, there's also a Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury. Now, I can't remember which is the one that's better against infantry and which one is better against monsters, but there's another Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury in there, and there are 2 Bloodthirsters of Insensate Rage. So 2 of each, 2 anti-monster, 2, or is it anti-hero, not monster? 2 anti-hero and 2 anti-infantry. So the 2 anti-infantry ones are out here, and the monster or the hero ones are here, and then the big general one is there. Now, what sneaky things can these Bloodthirsters do? Not too much that's sneaky. They can give each other loads of extra attacks, is the main thing I was concerned about. So they can get a lot of attacks. They have very high damage attacks. They can... Do they have the ability to shut down commands or something? I think they do have something like that in there. So, quite scary. It's the Army of Renown, the Baleful Lords. So the scariest thing, actually, is the idea that Bloodthirsters can just come back to life. But I feel like it's been done in a more fair way with this army. So instead of just automatically, or just having a command point for it, like Stormcast, for example, or just being able to do it constantly, it's as units die, you become more likely to get a Bloodthirster back. I don't know if it's really the best designed rule, but I think it's a bit more fair than some of the other units popping up back to life again. The more units that have been killed, the more chance there is of a Bloodthirster coming back later, and I think you have to get at least 8 units dead on the battlefield to do it. So this might not be a game for the Liberators to get themselves killed easily. My opponent also has Intercept and Recover, Restless Energy. Intercept and Recover, of course, I have to put Treasure on 3 of my units, and I've selected the 2 foot heroes there, and the Liberators. Stardrake is hiding in the corner. Very scary, lots of Bloodthirsters. Off in the sky, we've got all the shooting units, the Annihilators, and 1 unit of Liberators. So, I don't want to put everything on the table immediately, because it's just more things for the enemy to kill. But if we go back to the wide shot for a second, the anti-infantry Bloodthirsters are there, so I've quest marked the objective that's furthest away from them, because I don't want the Questors or the Annihilators really to fight those two. I don't want the Stardrake to fight any of these ones, so the Stardrake is going to deal with the anti-infantry ones, hopefully, and the Annihilators and the Questors, if I can get them around this objective, will try and deal with the anti-hero ones. Not necessarily that easy, but we shall see. I'm pretty confident I can kill them quite well, though. Okay, turn 1. My opponent is 4 drops, and I actually win the deployment roll, so I am able to force my opponent to go first, because I want to look for a double turn. I don't want to get doubled by Bloodthirsters. That sounds bad. So I think if I force the enemy to move out, and I get the turn 1 and 2 double, I could do massive damage to them. So let's see how it goes anyway. They move out to tag all the objectives to score some juicy points. I redeploy the Liberators to get a little bit further away. I only get an inch though, so they still can attempt the charge. And one of them does have a 3 dice charge, pick the 2 highest ability. So it's a little bit cagey from the Bloodthirsters. They're not eager to spread out too much, as you can imagine. 10 points. Into my turn. The Stardrake smacks into 2 Bloodthirsters at the same time. The Long Strikes have dropped down to do some shooting. The Vigilors have dropped in to do some shooting. And I put a lot of attacks into this one and did a ton of damage to it. The Stardrake went in, and I think I split my attacks thinking that I would have more than enough to finish off this one, with Finest Hour as well. But I didn't actually kill it, and I was forced to then, to stop them healing, because they heal when they're in combat, I was forced to power through from the Bloodthirster, because it has 16 wounds and the Stardrake has 18, so power through to get away, and do a bit more damage to it, and keep the Stardrake alive on 1 wound, and they'll then be able to rally next turn. So, look at that, 14 wounds done to this one, 4 done to the other one, and on the other side, I decided that just to roll the Blessed Weapons roll for my Knight Relictor, who is next to the Questors, and I just happened to roll a 6, so I blessed their weapons, sent them through the portal, and charged into the anti-hero Bloodthirster on this side, onto their quest-marked objective. And with all those millions of attacks, they actually did 12 damage to it. So I've done a lot of damage, but no kills yet, which could be important, because you don't want to be leaving these things alive. You need to be taking 1 down. 1 per turn, I would say, is an absolute minimum. Preferably like 1, and then 1 almost dead as well, so you can finish it off with covering fire or something. So, let's see. Oh, that's the wrong card there. So I've put the score onto the wrong objective, that's all. So it should be for taking an objective off the enemy, which is obviously not this one. So I've taken that objective with the Soul Sworn, because it's their favourite objective. They get the bonus, of course, so they've taken that one and got me a battle tactic. So I score 9 points. It is possible to score a weird number of points in this one, because there's several different categories of scoring. Stardrake rallies some wounds back in the next turn. And the Bloodthirsters are getting stuck in, so I don't get the double. And we've got the big, scary Bloodthirster of Doom, which is the Forge World one, I think, going in towards the Annihilators, who also dropped in but didn't make their charge, by the way. They just came in and did a little bit of damage to everybody. And we've got the other one there, maybe gunning for the Questors. And these two are obviously going to try and finish off that Star Drake. But the Long Strikes use their covering fire to kill one of them, which was the heavily damaged one. Now, I think my opponent intentionally put that one closer to them, because I think this one would also be in danger from covering fire, and maybe my opponent felt that way and decided, I'll give you the one that's going to die anyway, and let this one be healthy and go in. Maybe that was the thinking. So one of them is dead, so I'm going to have a tactic next turn regardless. The Questors are surrounded by Bloodthirsters. The Annihilators try to make a countercharge to get in, to join in the fight, but they do not make it, unfortunately. And this Bloodthirster all really high on the charge to get that far in and away from the Annihilators in the first place, and there's just enough space for the Purple Sun to not be involved as well. The Star Drake does go down, but I can accept that. The Questors get rid of the Bloodthirster that was already heavily damaged last time, and this one also takes a bit of damage as well, because their weapons are still blessed, of course, and there's one Questor left on one wound at the end of that, at the end of a power through. So, locking them both down in combat, and we've killed 2 Bloodthirsters on the enemy turn, and heavily wounded another one. So I'm feeling pretty good already. Those were the ward saves, I think, to protect against further damage from power through. So, 15 points for the enemy, but I'm feeling good kill-wise, because I feel like I can kill most of what's left in my turn 2 now. Turn 2, Annihilators get stuck in, Purple Sun gets stuck in, Liberators try to. We've got the Shackles in there to do damage as well. And just murder the big giant Bloodthirster, and the other one is still alive. The Shackles and the Purple Sun, I did have to consider the fact that these Bloodthirsters, they have an ability where if they're still in combat with a manifestation at the end of combat, they can try and, it's kind of a banishment roll, and if they succeed, it splashes damage onto the wizard that cast it, so I do have to be careful about that. The Knight Judicator drops in, Long Strikes, Vigilors, everybody just took aim at this Bloodthirster on the right and killed that one as well. Liberators teleporting around, coming in from the sky, getting onto objectives. So there's one Bloodthirster left, and it's pretty much how I thought it would go. Maybe I didn't think it would happen quite this fast. I just think it is a really bad matchup for the Bloodthirsters. The Stormcast, they've got the armour to survive some of those attacks that are coming in, and lots of small units doing shooting damage, so all-out defense isn't that effective against 3 different units that are shooting at you, and 4 when the Star Drake's up. So I think they just have a tough time. So I get 16 points that round, and I choose to take the double going into round 3, just to try and finish off the last Bloodthirster, get the Annihilators and Liberators stuck in there, shoot it with the Knight Judicator, who went through the teleport chamber to get there, dropped in some fresh Questors who didn't succeed in charging it, and just move around a bit with everybody else. Knock down its ward save by 1 with the Knight Relictor this time, who I didn't put him in harm's way yet until this moment. And 10 points that round because I took the double. But obviously the Bloodthirster just gets killed in the enemy turn, and no points for the enemy going to be coming in. But 8 units have died now, so my opponent is now able to roll those 8 dice, and if all of them are 4+, a fresh Bloodthirster can arrive each turn. But obviously that's very unlikely, and it doesn't happen. I just spread out my characters around, take all the objectives, and score big points going towards the end, complete my various tactics, and I might have actually marked the objectives backwards here, because I put that one down incorrectly there first, didn't I? But regardless, let me have a look at what may be more accurate, which is Malarkey. And the final score for that round is a resounding 69 points for the Stormcast Eternals, 25 points for the Blades of Khorne. So, I thought it would be a favourable matchup, and the Bloodthirsters were not able to get a lot done there, unfortunately for them. It helps that I was able to make them go first as well, as there was never a threat of the Bloodthirsters doubling me at an inopportune moment, which you don't want. So, all in all, looking good so far. 4 wins in a row. What is this madness? Considering this list was kind of thrown together on the Thursday, because I hadn't really played any practice games of AoS lately, I knew I wanted to get my Liberators and 3 more Shield Annihilators painted, and then crammed them into a list at the last minute. And it's actually doing very well. It's proving to be quite resilient. The enemy are not killing all my units that successfully. And I've got enough shenanigans, a little bit of teleporting sprinkled in, and enough units dropping in from the sky to shenanigan around. I've got enough units to drop in with shooting to focus fire on the enemy. There seems to be a decent balance. I don't know with the 3 units of Liberators. It's hard to say whether they're fully pulling their weight or not, but I feel like they are. It's tempting to say, why don't you just ditch some of those and bring in some more long strikes or something. But those Liberators are providing valuable bodies, and in some of the games, they've been holding their own in combat. So, let's see some pictures of the armies at lunchtime on day 2. We've got some delightful shiny metal iron jaws. I don't think you can quite see how shiny they are in these photos, but they are very shiny, with the Kragmeister. We have got a load of Terrorgeists. Not much more to be said about a load of Terrorgeists. Then we've got the Bloodthirsters, some slightly better photos of them here. We've got some Deepkin. Very ghostly looking Deepkin. Then we've got some very, very stylish Gits. Very colourful, very nice basing, little ponds. And very vibrant, which is what I like to see in an army. We have got some Sons of Bahamut using these, how would you even describe these, vaguely like Roman looking armour. This one is Kragnos, I think. So very cool theme there. Then we have got some bones. Look at all these bones. Good old Bone Reapers. They do bring a lot of bones to the table. And speaking of bones, we've got ghosts instead of bones here. So you can make one full ghost if you take all the bones from here and all of the ghoulish etherealness from this army. You can have one full piece of undead, I think. So a bit of Nighthaunt, more Stormcast with Iridan the Witness, and some Liberators, and Paladors, which obviously are very good. That face is very well done. That one particularly jumps out there. Very nice Paladors. As what everyone should know, I'm a big fan of Paladors. Reclusians, Vigilors. Then the Seraphon that I played against with some more photos of those. Very tentacly, very Cthulhian. Then we have got some Soulblight. And some more Soulblight. Plenty of death around the place. We've got some more Deepkin. These ones are nice and colourful. And then we've got some Lumineth. These actually look better close up than they do from a distance. Which most armies look really eye-catching from a distance, and then you get in there and there's not that much going on sometimes. But with these ones, like at a distance, I think it's the terrain maybe that they're on. The mat kind of blends in with the bases, so they don't really grab you. And the colours aren't particularly striking, but then when you get in, they're actually very well done. Very nice work on the hair there. Some Seraphon with a Bastiladon. Plenty of Croxagore and a Slan. Then we've got some Skaven that are a really bizarre set of converted Kharadron Overlord and Gyrocopter stuff which are turned into Skaven vehicles, which are very exciting. One of them is kind of Dr. Robotnik. And look at this. I think this is a frigate or an ironclad with a screaming bell or something on the back of it. Very weird, very cool, very nice concept. And you can see these clear balls. They're kind of like hamster wheels on top of the ships that have been modified with wheels at the back there. Very stylish. Then we've got KO with some of the new units there. I do have some of those. I haven't painted them yet, and I've got one of these as well. Cities of Sigmar. These are very cool as well. Nice, brightly coloured. Unpainted base. Disgraceful. But very cool army there. Got some ogres. And I think these are 3D printed ogres, so not the GW ones, but pretty stylish. And into the final round. So, the way the leaderboard's looking, if I lose the game, I could drop down a significant number of places. I'm currently on the top table. Only 2 players have 4 wins out of 4. I'm one of them. If the game is a draw, that means I win the event. But draws are quite uncommon in Age of Sigmar. So for you to get exactly the same number of points is very unlikely. So if I win, obviously I win the event. If I draw, I win the event. If I lose, then I'll drop down. It just depends by how much, depending on how much I lose by, pretty much. So I'm probably in with a good chance of finishing in the top 3 regardless, but it's possible I could be booted out if I lose by enough. So, Roiling Roots. Tangling Tendrils. So that's the underdog bonus, and you put strike last onto objectives. The scoring is pretty standard, 5 for 1, 3 for pairs, and 2 for more. Nothing too weird with that. We've got a pair fairly close together in the middle there, so they're probably the easiest if you want to just control a small area of the table. And then we've got 2 really far apart of a pair there if you want to hold the flanks instead. And I'm going to crack open my opponent's list. So at this point, I'm thinking, surely I'm going to be playing someone who's wearing like a team t-shirt, because it's the top table, the final round, surely. And that was definitely the case. My opponent definitely with a well-seasoned opponent with a well-seasoned list and a team t-shirt, which is what I always expect from the players. That are going to be very difficult. Very challenging game ahead, I'm predicting, against the Deepkin, who apparently play in a similar style to my Stormcast list, is what I was hearing going in, where they just won't die very much and they'll shenanigan their way to points. They have more tricks than I do, but they're more intricate tricks that rely on other things, so you have to set up a lot of things with the different units together, and there's more debuffs they can apply to my army. There's various ways of reducing my charge distances, so something like the Star Drake, if they choose to, they can just make it very bad at charging for the entire game. And could be tricky, but most of them are flying, so they won't be able to hide from my shooting very much. It is 2 drops. And let me find the right place here. Okay, so what have we got? We have got various sharks, which are I think they're technically called the Achillean alapexes, but 170 points for a shark that is pretty good. Can put -1 charge dice onto enemy units from shooting at them. Has, I think it's 8 wounds. Pretty solid unit, but they can come back to life with the cost of a command point. Every single one of them can do that, apparently. Which seems pretty wild as far as recursion, as the phrase people like to use. That seems one of the more obnoxious ones. The fact that it costs a command point, you bring it back at full strength, and you can do it with every single one. And there are 4 in the army. So effectively, you're getting a lot more points for the value of them, because you're using them twice. And then when they die, they can pop up, not particularly limited. I think it might be limited to near the table edge, possibly. But it's not like it's limited to appearing near the terrain or something, near your faction terrain or near a character. And there's no dice roll attached to it, it's just a command point. and each one of them can do it. So that's a lot of extra sharks coming back if you do kill them. So what else have we got in here other than them? So they're in the General's Regiment with the Eidolon, who is 340 points, and you can only hit him on a 4, so quite a scary character there. There is another regiment with Icon of the Storm, who is the little guy on foot somewhere, who is in amongst this rabble. Might be him at the back there. And joined by 6 Achillean Morsar Guard reinforced. That's the cavalry eels there. So they're not quite as scary as the sharks, but they can still be pretty scary. And we've got the giant turtle as well, who is... which unit is that? Oh yeah, the Leviathan, there we go. So that's 470 points, so that's going to be quite a scary unit. There's going to be like mortal wounds thrown around. One of the tricks they have is that they have these tides that they can switch between the path of abilities. So they can be, for example, -1 to hit against them, board wide for the entire battle round, which is quite horrifying. And they can do other things like run and charge and do mortal wounds. Just seems like a very strong list of abilities they have. So in the hands of someone that knows what they're doing, quite a scary concept. I'm forced to go first, so I just put some liberators. By the way, in this game, I've decided to take the step of putting a token on all my units to show that they haven't used Finest Hour yet. Because I don't think it's come up that I've ever incorrectly used Finest Hour, but I decided just to be safe, because when you get to the end of the game, it is easy to forget sometimes which ones have already had it earlier. So I'm going to find some suitable tokens for a permanent solution, and I'm going to start marking every single unit and then taking it away when they've used Finest Hour. Or if I decide that's too much hassle, I'll add a token to them once they've already used it. So let's go back to the wide chart so I can talk about the plan. The enemy is obviously in a big castle. There's one shark over there on its own, so obviously that's something I could try and kill. I've put the quest marked objective close to me because I don't want to be that close to all the enemy units who could then just converge and murder the questors on their own, which I think they would do handily, even with the ward save. And do I just go very aggressive immediately, throw everything up there onto the objectives, try and score points and try and deny the enemy scoring points early on, and then maybe just get overrun with everything, just steamrolls through my whole army? Or do I play it very cautious, stay back, try and shenanigan my way to some points later on? Because I don't play against much Deepkin. Not many people play them here. And when was the last time I played against Deepkin? It must have been quite a while. I can think of maybe 1 or 2 players that I've seen use them before and I have played against, and it's usually the very good players that seem to play Deepkin, or I was talking to my opponent about this as well. It's either the really good players who know how to use them because they're very difficult to master, or it's the very new players who think, fish people, that's cool, I'll get those fish elves, and then they don't do very well with them. So, I'm not feeling too confident, but let's go into the first round. So moved up onto the objectives, slowly walking towards this shark, but not too eager. I want the enemy to have to come out and kill me. I've got my questors in a position where they're in obscuring terrain, so they can't be shot. There's loads of shooting from the enemy that does high damage, and I've put them on their quest marked objective while being obscured. So, lovely blurry shot there. This is a manifestation that was countercast, and my plan was, when moving everything up, the enemy is going to have to commit something if they want to break through my lines and start taking objectives off me. And then once it does commit, I'll then be able to drop down and start picking things off one by one. So let's see if that comes to fruition. The enemy manifestation makes its way towards me. Oh, by the way, the enemy battle tactics are Scouting Force and Master the Paths. Scouting Force is apparently very easy to score, but I haven't seen enough people playing it to really be that familiar with it. I just know that they want to move forward and then like hug terrain and that kind of thing later on. So, shooting takes down 3 Liberators. The shark takes down a Liberator on the right flank. And shooting from over there, potentially into these ones, isn't doing too much. And the Liberators drop to a manifestation, which isn't very nice. So when I was thinking the enemy would have to commit if they wanted to break through, they actually don't, because they're just throwing this just complete throwaway manifestation at me, and it's taken out a unit on its own, so that's pretty powerful. Not like ridiculously overpowered, but enough to get rid of one unit of Liberators, it seems. So, what I'm concerned about now is that I'm never going to be allowed to hit anything that I can permanently kill. So, if the Sharks do a good enough job spreading out, then they'll prevent me from landing near the Eidolon and the Leviathan and the cavalry at the back there. And if I just focus on killing the Sharks, all of them can come back to life, one each per turn. So, and then there's manifestations, so I'll be stuck fighting Sharks if I throw myself in, I think, because they're going to be on the front lines mostly. So it is a concern that I'm not going to be able to get to the meat. So I go in the priority and I give away the turn here because I want to give my opponent one more chance to spread out a bit before I start dropping anything in, and I want the double turn. I'm going to build my strategy 100% around getting a double against this lot because they're going to be able to slow down my charges, which is going to make it very unlikely with just one turn I'll actually charge anybody. So I'm giving away the turn to try and get a double later. The manifestation is going for my Knight Relictor, who was down here. I teleported him over there, so the manifestation would chase me towards the Questors, and then I could go and beat him up with them. Really, if I just wanted to keep safe, I could have just teleported him into a corner. But I wanted to tempt him over here so I could beat him up with the Questors and kill it. And I'm pretty sure I tried to banish the manifestation, but even with the +1 for the Knight Arcanum, I did not succeed. So, the Eidolon is going over this way with my... I think it's got a teleport, and then it can do spells and then teleport away again. So Sharks just spreading out around the place. One of them goes into the Liberators on the left flank, one of them is still standing. The manifestation gets into combat with the... I think I have to countercharge the Questors to get in there with it. And they don't kill it, which surprised me. It's just tough. I wasn't really familiar with its stats before going in. I just assumed that the Questors with all their attacks would probably kill it, but they did not. They made some good saves. And as you can see, the way the enemy is spread out, there's very little spaces for me to land. I can fit something small in there, I can get something behind this building. Nothing in there, which would be a juicy place. Nothing here. So I'm limited where I can land. So, in my turn, the enemy scores 10. I'm going to go for... everything is going to drop in. And I'm going to 100% put everything into the double turn basket. Because I feel like if I continue to play cautiously, my opponent is just going to build up enough of a lead, and then I'll have to drop everything in eventually at some point. So why not do it now before my opponent has built up a big lead? Because I don't have the units on the table to actually compete with what's out there, particularly, and anything I do put on the table is immediately in danger of being murdered, I think. I'm not going to be able to get to any of the meaty stuff there with enough at the same time, so I think I need the double turn. So I'm going to drop everything down, try and get the double, and then throw in everything at the same time and try and just do massive damage over those 2 turns, probably the second one of those turns. So, don't know why there's a picture of that dice. So we've got the Knight Judicator dropping in, we've got the Annihilators dropping in, the Knight Relictor teleporting over here. Takes some damage because this goes through the portal, so I don't roll high enough to actually translocate him. Long Strike's dropping down here. Throw out our Purple Sun, the Stardrake. You will notice actually that the Stardrake did not start on the table, because I thought it'd be shot to death. So, I brought it on over here and tried to kill the Shark, and I think I ended up finishing it off with these Liberators. I shot with the Vigilors. I brought down various units that would prevent covering fire from being used on the Stardrake. Questors are moved up here. They had to use their teleport actually to escape from the manifestation, so that was a terrible idea trying to fight that thing. I just didn't realise how tough it was. And I do manage to take an objective off my opponent, so I've got some points there, so there's 10. Now, from this position, the double turn I think could be quite good. I've got Annihilators that are going to be able to move 4 inches forwards there. There's multiple enemy units, so not all of them can redeploy, so I should have a reasonable chance to charge something. I've got the Purple Sun that can move in as well and get stuck in. I've got the Questors that can go this way, the Stardrake can get to about here and then look for a charge. try and keep the quest doors closer so they would be the subject of covering fire. I've got the long strikes down here that can try and kill that shark, or they can run up here and shoot the Eidolon, whatever I'm planning to focus on bringing down. And then I'm in amongst the enemy. If I've got the Annihilators here, if I've got the Stardrake here, the quest doors here, I've got all my hard-hitting stuff kind of surrounding this enemy bundle then, if I get the double turn. So that's what I'm going for. And it sounds good. So let's see if I can do it, because I have got more drops, so I will get a reroll on priority as well. And no. It doesn't matter if you've got rerolls if your opponent just rolls a 6 on the priority roll. So the Deepkin are going next. And my all or nothing strategy, I feel like it's probably means that I've 100% lost from this point on. That was my feeling at the time anyway. Because I put all the eggs into that basket, I felt that was my best chance to try and achieve anything in the game. I didn't feel like being very cautious and kind of squeaking out like a 10-point loss at the end over the course of a long and dull game. I didn't feel like that was going to be very exciting. And I didn't feel like that was going to be beneficial when I could go for the chance of just completely crunching the enemy with the double turn. It's not paid off right now, so we'll see if I can glide through the enemy turn and then maybe get a double after that, which won't be as good, but we'll see. We've got enemies going after my terrain, which isn't very nice. Debuffs are being thrown onto my various units. The Annihilators have their save dropped, and the quest doors have their charge halved. And based on that being done to the Annihilators, I then translocate them away with a counter prayer over onto the right-hand side where it's a bit safer. Because they were just going to get crunched otherwise, and then if the fight was taking place here, none of my units over here would be able to get there to actually do anything about it until it was too late. So I thought, let's just teleport them over there. If the enemy want to come and get me, they're in the danger zone then where most of my units are. The Stardrake is taking a bit of damage from some shooting. We've got Sharks finishing off the Liberators in there with the Eidolon, who's going for the Knight Relictor. Faction terrain is destroyed. The Knight Judicator in the corner is destroyed. My opponent thought it was a bad idea me putting the Knight Judicator there because it sets up the battle tactic for killing a hero, but my entire strategy was based around getting that double turn. So, had I got the double turn, I would have been glad to have him there because I could have maybe thrown his dog at somebody. So, 17 points to the enemy, but importantly, they are a bit more spread out, which means I can't box them in quite so much. And I've got charges reduced on various units, which isn't going to be good. Turn 3 for me. Long strikes just moving up, trying to do some damage. I'm not too worried about shooting the Eidolon with them, because they hit on 3s normally, and it'll only be putting them down to 4, so it's a bit like having covering fire on your own turn when shooting at it. So I think it's still worth trying to shoot with long strikes. My opponent disagrees. The Stardrake and the quest doors have both got their charge reduced, so they have 0 chance of succeeding with a charge this turn. The Stardrake's on -1 dice, and the questers are on their charge is halved, so I don't think either of them can physically make it in this turn, so we're just going for the double again. Edging towards the enemy, moving towards them with the purple sun, and the Vigilors who are going to try and shoot down this shark. Annihilators moving forward towards the enemy, but they're still reduced armor. So, I do control every objective in enemy territory. And yeah, that's right. So I do score 10. And I do get the double. So let's see what I can do. The Questers and the Stardrake splat into the enemy with a ward save because I lost a unit last turn, so the Stardrake has a ward save now, and Finest Hour. The Annihilators smash into the enemy faction terrain, which they were hoping to use as like a slingshot to attack someone else, but the only enemy that was there redeployed a considerable distance away from them. The long strikes moved and fired as well. The Vigilors fired, but even with that double, all my damage has just been bouncing off the enemy. So they've got nice armor, obviously, and ward saves, and I haven't been able to crack them. So barely any damage done despite that double. So that's not great. So it's looking like it's not going to be a huge loss, but it's probably going to be a loss. I'm not going to lose by a huge amount. Because there's no reason for the enemy to just get into a splat war with all my strong units now, because they're already in the lead, so they'll probably just skate around and try and win that way. You can see I was going all in to try and do as much damage as possible, so I've even got shackles thrown out there to try and do the mortals. But 10 points. So I'm scoring pretty solidly throughout, but obviously not as high as this little bundle here. So, turn 4 for my opponent, and getting things stuck in. The Eidolon going for the long strikes. We've got the Leviathan going into the Star Drake, who is not looking too healthy. We've got the cavalry there as well. Liberator's still just hanging out, feeling fine on that objective over there. We've got the Manifestation and one of the sharks into the Vigilors. You would think the Vigilors would have killed a shark now. They've been firing at it for like 3 turns. And they actually end up surviving for the round and holding on to this objective for the time being, because the Manifestation isn't worth anything on there. The Star Drake does get killed though. So my opponent is able to score 15, completing more battle tactic nuggets as well. Turn 5 for me, I go first. Not too much I can do. The Vigilors die. Annihilators steam onto the objective and clear out the cavalry there to take that objective, giving me 7 points. And then in the enemy turn, the Leviathan, not the Leviathan, the Eidolon and one of the sharks just go into the corners so they can complete more battle tactic bits. And there you go. So that is the final score, which is 62 points to the Deepkin, 44 to the Stormcast. So, the Deepkin were able to win via scoring more battle tactics. I was never really in a position where I had a great chance of killing one of the enemy heroes, which is the first part of the tactic. So occasionally you will face a list and you think, I don't even know how I'm doing part 1 of this, because they were quite well hidden. I did have a couple of chances to shoot at the Eidolon, but it's pretty resilient, and you need a bit of luck to bring that thing down. So that didn't happen. But as you can see, I did score reasonably throughout. I just wasn't able to stop the enemy scoring, which is pretty much expected. They've got a lot of mobility. They've got kind of easy to score tactics as well. And it didn't really come up in this game, I don't think, too much. But the biggest nonsense of all is that when you pick Scouting Force, if you bring a unit back to life, they still count as scouts, which I don't think they should, really. I think that makes it a bit too easy, especially for armies like Stormcast or these sharks, for example, where you can bring them down and they still count when you can bring them back to life. Seems a bit odd, that. But that game there, I would say, felt like the biggest skill or game knowledge, or however you want to put it, discrepancy between me and an opponent, negatively for me, that I've had in quite some time. I can probably think of the last time it happened, and that may have been... Was it when the players from Team Australia came over to the TSN for an event? It could have been then. When you just feel like your opponent knows exactly how the game's going to go from the start and has it all planned out in the head already, and you're just going on vibes, as the kids say. And it felt a little bit like that. It felt like my opponent had the game kind of mapped out and knew how many points were going to be scored each turn and which tactic was going to be scored when. I think that just comes from playing the list a lot and being very familiar with it, and having played against all different kinds of opponents with it and knowing what the best moves are. And I didn't feel particularly well equipped to deal with that. I didn't feel like I had a strategy that was capable of winning the game outside of try to get the double and squash everything, which is viable. That can work, and it might have worked. If it had worked at the moment that I tried to get it the first time, then maybe that could have worked. I don't think it was like a good chance of happening, but it was more chance of happening. The enemy were stuck closer together. I think I could have got more units into them because I wouldn't have lost any of my units that were available to me yet, and I would have had less of the debuffs on me, I think, at that point as well. So that would have been a bit more likely to work if I got the double that earlier time. But you can't rely on getting double turns. You can plan so that you can maximise the opportunity when you do get them, and you can plan to mitigate how damaging they're going to be against you. But you can't plan specifically to have them to win a game, because that's not necessarily going to work. You need to have something a bit more solid than that, and I don't feel like I had anything there. So I'd be interested to see what people have to say about this. How would you have approached this game? Would you have deployed differently? Would you have been more aggressive, more cautious? Would you have gone on to any specific objectives with certain units? Would you have targeted certain things? Would you have kept certain things in the sky for longer? Would you have brought anything down sooner? Would you have brought everything down turn 1 and just flooded the objectives? Would you have kept everything until the last possible moment and then tried to just shenanigan your way, teleporting around and scoring points right at the end? Interested to hear what people have to say about that, because I didn't visualise a path to victory other than get the double and squash everybody, which as we know is not reliable. Anyone says, would you play different next time? I don't even know how to go about that in this particular matchup. I don't know what I would do differently, because I think I just need some... I've got the experience of playing against it now, and I still haven't drawn too many conclusions yet. I think I need to consult with the wise counsel of Stormcast players somewhere and give me some hints on how to deal with this. This is apparently quite a strong Deepkin list though, so I would be interested to know. My opponent actually felt that it was a tricky matchup for him as well with my Stormcast. I just couldn't visualise it and figure out how to actually implement a plan that would realise that vision that my opponent seemed to have more than I did. So let me know what you think of that, particularly that game, and what I could do there, because obviously winning 4 in a row, that's not going to happen too often, and finding yourself in that position where you can win an event if you can win one more game, and coming up against something that you don't feel like you can deal with. And it's the kind of thing that makes players probably go and start studying lists and practicing online, which are obviously things I don't particularly do. I don't really pay attention to the armies I don't play until I play them, and then I learn what they do based on that. And then I play too many different game systems to really practice anything too comprehensively. But it also feels pretty good getting to the top table in the final round at an event when there are players there that play the game a lot more than I do. There were some new players there as well, some quite new players I think. So it was a good mix. You do generally get that at the TSN, because there's a solid core of veteran players. Some of the top players attend events there sometimes. And you also get new players as well. And maybe we'll see even more of that actually with the slightly increased venue capacity. There's going to be more tickets available. So we might see even more new players. I'm looking forward to that. And I like this Stormcast list that I've got here. I think I just need a bit more direction with it in these kind of tricky shenanigan matchups. It did the job in all the other games. Even in games where I lost quite a few units early on, I was able to wrangle my way back in scoring points. And I like the Shield Annihilators, Reinforced Shield Annihilators. I really like them. They did a good job. They didn't get themselves killed too much. And mostly they were just pretty solid, and they can do decent damage as well. The Questors, obviously, always solid. The Liberators, I don't know exactly what to say about them, because they do a good job for the points, but it means you're taking less of the cool stuff when you take them. The Knight Arcanum, just having a one-cast wizard in this economy, I'm not sure about it. I like the +1 manifestations, but I did miss the Storm Coven a little bit in this event. That was the only thing really. But can I really be digging deep in and critiquing my own list too much when it's just won 4 games, which doesn't happen very often for me with Stormcast? Age of Sigmar, I think, is the game I've had the least success playing over the years. Even though I've played a lot of tournaments, this is like tournament 38. I don't feel like I've ever really come close to winning a singles event, apart from one one-dayer where I was one dice roll away from winning that. But for the most part, I don't feel competitive in this game with the top players, and I think that's the nature of this game compared to others. If you... what would I compare this to? If you compare it to something like Kings of War, everything's more straightforward in that game. You have an idea what everything does, and you can use a plan visually based on what the enemy army is, rather than having to know ins and outs and intricate things they can do that can then set off other things, and you don't want to be near certain units because this will happen. You have to really know enemy units inside and out to be a top Age of Sigmar player, I think. There's a lot of shenanigans you can do, a lot of reactions that other games don't have. So I think it lends itself more towards the top players winning more than other games do. The ones that I play anyway. The one game where I feel like I don't have to have played in 2 years and can turn up and still win an event is Dead Zone. And I don't know whether that is about me just being good at it, or whether it's just the game rules are designed in such a way that you don't need to be up on everything to still compete, or whether I just have strong units that I use in that game. Obviously I've won a Warhammer Old World event with Chaos Warriors, the first time I ever put them on the table, which maybe says more about how strong Chaos Dragons were before the recent nerf. I've won a couple of Kings of War events. How many is it now? I think I've won 2 singles Kings of War and 1 doubles. I think that's right, but I've been to loads of those. I've got loads of podium finishes from Kings of War, though. Particularly, there was a couple of year stretch where I would routinely finish 2nd a lot and 3rd. So I've got quite a lot of trophies for that game. Age of Sigmar, though, other than that mixed doubles win, the singles event win continues to evade me. Maybe one day that'll change. I think a lot of it depends on who turns up to the event. If you get any of the top players there, I don't feel like I have a good chance to beat any of them. If you have people who are more around my sort of level, then I think I can put together lists that can do a good job on them. And just generally quite decent lists. Okay, I think it's about time to wrap this one up. How long have we been going? Just over 2 hours. That's not too bad, is it? And I ended up finishing 3rd, by the way, at this event, which is nice. I got a nice certificate, and I don't think I put a picture of it in here, unfortunately, but there is a photo floating around, and it was a lot of fun. Fun actually winning a lot of games as Stormcast for a change, and the list felt good. So, 3rd place, very happy with that. Actually, the player who finished 2nd was the 5 Bloodthirsters that I massacred in Game 4, who was then able to crush a load of Sons of Behemat in round 5 and leap back over me again slightly, by a couple of points, I think. So, 3rd place, pretty happy with that overall, and don't forget to check out all the links in the description. Don't forget to leave some comments on any of that, particularly that final game. I want to hear what people have to say about that. And if you want me to attend many more tournaments and keep buying all those tournament tickets, keep bringing you the juicy analysis afterwards, then why not pledge your entire life savings in the Patreon or the PayPal links down in the description as well. I did just spend a small fortune on the next 8 months of TSN Arena events for Age of Sigmar and Old World. So a nicely booked calendar until late June, I think, is it? Something like that. And I've also got a Dead Zone event coming up in November, I believe. So that's going to be exciting. And I'm looking out for Kings of War. There's a new edition of that coming out imminently. And just being very busy playing lots of different games. I spent the last few days furiously painting Stormcast. Now it's probably time to paint... Who have we got? I could maybe paint some Chaos Knights for Old World. I think I need some of those. And everywhere I look, there's unpainted miniatures around here. So there's always going to be projects on the go. For AoS, it's going to be probably the Kharadron Overlords. I've got the Ironclad to do, and then I can actually put an army on the table once that's done. And then I can start looking at the faction terrain and some of the new units that I bought. So exciting times ahead for all the game systems. Keeping on a wide variety of systems on this channel for the foreseeable future. And I can't imagine just playing one game system. Can't get into that mindset. I think it would drive me nuts. I need more. Okay, let's wrap this one up. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for the comments that popped up in there from time to time. And all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.